Welcome to my expat stories. There's a specific kind of blind spot that comes from being educated, from being curious, from having spent years learning how to look at the world carefully and ask the right questions about what you see. It's not arrogance exactly, it's something quieter than arrogance and harder to argue with. It's the assumption that the frameworks you've built for understanding the world are sufficient for the world. That preparation means research. That research means reading. That reading is the same as knowing. Mikkel spent 6 years studying how cities work, how communities form in the gaps between what a city officially provides and what it actually is. He knew more about informal urban settlements in Latin America than most people who live near them. He could tell you the history, the sociology, the political economy of a neighbourhood, like the one he walked into, with his camera on a Tuesday afternoon in Soledad. He just hadn't asked anyone who lived there whether he should come. Got this one from a listener. Mikkel said share it. Said maybe someone reads it and asks the question he didn't ask before they walk somewhere their research can't protect them. If you want daily Colombia cautionary tales instead of every other day, hit subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Here's Mikkel. My name is Mikkel. I'm 34. I'm from Copenhagen. I work in urban planning, specifically informal settlements, the way cities grow in the spaces between official development. The favelas, the comunas, the barrios that appear on no city plan and house a third of the population. I find them, I want to say this clearly because it matters to what happened, genuinely extraordinary. Not as problems to be solved, as communities, as places where people have built something out of nothing and developed their own systems, their own governance, their own invisible architecture that functions in ways that formal cities often don't. I came to Colombia for the second time specifically to see Soledad. Soledad is a municipality of 665,000 people sitting directly against the southern edge of Barranquilla, part of the metropolitan area, effectively absorbed into Barranquilla in every practical sense, and almost completely invisible to anyone who visits the coast. Nobody goes to Soledad. The travel articles don't mention it, the tour operators don't offer it. The expat forums have maybe 3 posts about it, all of them saying don't bother, nothing to see. That's precisely why I wanted to go. I'd read a paper, an academic study of informal settlements in the Soledad municipality, published in a Brazilian urban planning journal. It described 63 barrios of informal origin, over 600 hectares of urban land occupied by invasions and illegal settlements. Families who had come from rural areas displaced by decades of conflict, guerrillas, paramilitaries, the cocaine economy, and built lives in the gaps between what the city officially provided and what they actually needed. Self-built houses, unpaved streets, children playing in red earth, the reduction of vegetation cover between 30 and 50% as people cleared land to build on because they had nowhere else to go. It was, professionally and humanly, one of the most interesting urban documents I'd read in years. I packed my camera, a good one. I use it for documentation work, field research, the visual record that sits alongside the academic. I took the bus from Barranquilla's main terminal to the Soledad terminal on Carrera 14. I spoke to nobody before I went. No local, no expat, nobody in my hotel. I didn't look it up on the expat forums or the safety groups or the WhatsApp networks that exist precisely to answer questions like, is it safe to walk into this neighbourhood alone with a camera on a Tuesday afternoon? I didn't ask because it didn't occur to me to ask. In Copenhagen, it wouldn't have occurred to me. You don't ask permission to document a neighbourhood in Copenhagen. The framework I'd been living inside for 34 years had never required that question, and so the question didn't exist for me. It exists for me now. The bus terminal at Soledad on a Tuesday morning, busy, functional, the ordinary chaos of a large transit point in a hot city, minibuses coming and going, vendors with cold drinks and food, the smell of exhaust and something fried and the particular heat of Barranquilla at 10 in the morning. 30 degrees already, the humidity adding what felt like 5 more, the air thick and present in the way it is on the coast. I walked out of the terminal and turned left, away from the main road toward the residential streets. This is how I always start. Walk away from the centre, find the ordinary, find the texture of how people actually live, rather than how a place presents itself to strangers. I had my camera out from the first street. This is habit. I document as I walk. Not selectively, just continuously, the way some people think in words, and some people think in images. I was thinking in images. The first streets near the terminal were busy enough. Market stalls. A woman selling fruit from a cart. A group of men outside a tyre repair shop. I filmed it all. Normal. Warm. A man at the tyre shop looked at the camera and looked away. The mildly resigned expression of someone who'd been photographed by tourists before, and found it faintly annoying but not threatening. I walked further in. The streets changed. Unpaved. Red earth roads. Rutted where vehicles had passed in wet weather and dried into ridges. Smaller houses. Concrete block. Some rendered. Some not. The grey of unfinished concrete sitting next to the faded pastels of the ones that had been painted at some point and not repainted since. Corrugated metal roofs. A satellite dish on almost every house. The thing people buy first when they have anything, because connection matters more than render. Washing lines between houses, the colours bright in the morning sun. A child playing outside a house. Maybe 6 years old, barefoot. Not because he'd been robbed of his shoes, but because on this particular morning, in this particular house, shoes were not a priority that had been addressed yet. He looked at me with the straightforward curiosity of a child who hasn't learned yet to be anything else. I raised the camera. He grinned. I filmed him grinning. I was thinking, this is exactly what I came for. This is the city inside the city. This is the 665,000 people that the travel articles don't mention. I was not thinking about the man I'd passed 3 minutes earlier, sitting against a wall on a corner. Older, weathered, who had looked up at me as I passed. Not aggressively, not with any particular expression, and made eye contact for exactly the time it takes to register and categorize a piece of information, then looked away. I was not thinking about the boy on a bicycle who had come past me twice going in the same direction I was walking. Once I'd noticed it, thought, oh, he lives around here, he's going somewhere nearby. Didn't think about it again. I was not thinking about any of this because none of it had a category in the framework I was using to understand the neighbourhood. I was reading the neighbourhood as an urban planner reads a settlement. Structures, density, community organisation, the informal systems of provision. I was reading it with the tools I had. The tools I had were the wrong tools for what was happening. I found a street that was... I want to try to describe it accurately because it deserves to be described. An unpaved road maybe 4 metres wide, houses close on both sides. A jacaranda tree somehow growing between two houses, throwing shade across half the road. The light through the jacaranda was extraordinary. Dappled, moving slightly, in what passed for a breeze. A woman in a doorway watching the street, in the particular way of someone who spends time in doorways, comfortable in the observation. A dog asleep in the dust at the edge of the road, one ear twitching at flies. And at the end of the street, just visible, a car, parked outside a building. Dark-coloured. Plates visible. Slightly incongruous. Newer than the street. Better maintained than anything else on the road. I panned the camera across the street towards it. 4 seconds, maybe. Just part of the scene. The jacaranda light. The woman in the doorway. The sleeping dog. The car. Then I heard the motorcycle. Not threatening. Just the sound of a motorcycle on a nearby street. The kind of sound you hear every 30 seconds in any Colombian city. I didn't register it as significant. I walked on for another 20 metres. Then 2 men came around the corner ahead of me, not running, walking, but with a purposefulness that is different from ordinary walking, in a way that registers before you've consciously processed it. Something in the pace, the direction, the focus of it. I knew before I knew, if that makes sense. My body processed it about 3 seconds before my brain caught up. The younger one reached me first. He was, I'd say 19, maybe 20. A floral shirt unbuttoned to the chest. Tattoos on both forearms. A specific one on the left I noticed without being able to read it. A bandana, dark, worn around the neck. Small pieces of jewellery. A chain. A ring on the right hand. He was not large. He wasn't physically imposing. He was imposing in the way that someone is imposing when they move through a space like they own it. Because in any meaningful sense they do. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He stood close enough that the distance was itself a statement and said something in Spanish I didn't fully catch. Then in flat English, without malice, as if reading from a list, the camera. The man behind him. Older, 40-something, hardware shop ordinary. No tattoos, no performance. Said nothing. He didn't need to say anything. He was the second fact in a sentence the first man had started. I looked at the camera in my hands, looked at the street behind me, the woman who was no longer in the doorway, the dog who had moved. looked at the end of the street where the motorcycle had stopped, and a third man sat on it, watching without particular urgency. I am a 34-year-old urban planner from Copenhagen. I am not, under any circumstances, a man who fights his way out of situations. I have never been in a situation that required me to consider fighting my way out of it. I considered it for about 1 second. Not seriously, just because your brain checks the box, and I moved on. I gave him the camera, he took it, looked at it briefly, not with the interest of someone who wanted a camera, with the interest of someone checking what they had. He passed it to the older man. The older man looked at it. Then he looked at me. Then he said, in careful English that had clearly been used before, "Come." Not a question. I came. The building was 2 streets back in the direction I hadn't come from. A courtyard entrance. Not a house exactly, more of a compound, several structures around a central space. We went through the courtyard and into the largest structure, through a main room where a woman was doing something at a counter without looking up, through a corridor, into a room at the back. The room. I've thought about this room many times since. The ceiling fan turning without reducing the heat, just moving it around in slow circles. A television on a shelf. A football match, sound low. 2 teams I didn't recognise. A plastic table. 2 plastic chairs on one side. A child's shoe near the door. Just one, no explanation offered. The smell of something cooking from deeper in the building, garlic and onion, someone's lunch preparing itself with complete indifference to what was happening in this room. Normal domestic sounds from somewhere. All of it completely ordinary, and none of it manageable by any framework I had available. And the chair that was not plastic, not bought, handmade, dark wood, heavy, the kind of construction that takes time and intention, and knowledge. Carved armrests, worn smooth where forearms had rested for years. The grain of the wood visible and deliberate. It sat in that concrete room like it had always been there, and the room had been built around it, which for all I know was true. The man who sat in it came in after me. He was, I want to describe him accurately, 50-something, not large. He moved without hurry. He was wearing a plain shirt, dark trousers, clean shoes. Nothing remarkable. He could have been a retired school teacher. He could have been someone's grandfather. He had the face of a man who has spent a long time listening to things and making decisions about them, and finds the process neither exciting nor troubling. Just the work of being who he is in the place he's from. The young one, the tattooed one, was by the door, standing, arms folded, not watching me particularly, just present. A human notation at the end of a sentence. A third man I hadn't seen before sat in the corner doing something on his phone. He didn't look up once during the entire time I was in that room. Whatever was on his phone was more interesting to him than I was. That indifference was... I don't have the right word for it. It made me feel more like a process than a person, which was accurate. The man in the handmade chair looked at me for a moment, then at the camera on the table between us, then back at me. Then he said, in English that was careful, chosen, the kind of English that arrives in complete sentences with small, precise words. He said, "What are you filming this for?" I said I was a researcher. Urban planning. I was documenting the neighbourhood because I wanted... He raised one hand. A small gesture. Not threatening, just... Stop. He'd heard the sentence before and didn't need the rest of it. He said, "Show me." He meant the footage. He picked up the camera, found the SD card, removed it, placed it on the table, then replaced it, turned the camera toward me, said, "You show me." I showed him. I want you to understand what that was like, to sit in a concrete room in Soledad with a ceiling fan and a low football match, and a child's single shoe near the door, and watch your own footage with a man you don't know who is deciding something about what happens next, based on what appears on a screen. My hands were completely steady. I noticed this with a kind of remote surprise. I was frightened. I want to be honest about that. I was genuinely frightened in a way I had not been in my adult life. But my hands were steady. My voice when I spoke was normal. And I think this was not courage. It was just my body making the practical decision that anything other than steady and normal made the situation worse. We watched the bus journey, the terminal, the first streets, the fruit vendor, the tyre shop. He watched without expression. The deeper streets, the unpaved roads, the houses. He watched. The man against the wall, the one who had looked at me and looked away. On the screen, the eye contact lasted maybe 2 seconds. Longer than it had felt at the time. The man in the chair leaned forward very slightly. The ceiling fan turned. The football match murmured. I kept my face exactly as it was. The street with the jacaranda, the woman in the doorway, the sleeping dog, the pan across to the car outside the building. He reached forward and stopped the footage. 4 seconds of a dark car on a street. Plates visible in the frame, a building behind it with a small marking on the wall that I had not noticed at the time of filming and could not read now. He looked at the frozen image, then at me. He said, "You know what this is?" Not a question. I said no. And I want to be clear. This was true. I didn't know what the car was. I didn't know what the building was. I didn't know what the plates meant, or the marking on the wall, or why those 4 seconds mattered. I was a man from Copenhagen who had filmed a Tuesday afternoon in a neighbourhood he'd read about in a journal. I had filmed a car the same way I'd filmed the jacaranda and the sleeping dog. It meant nothing to me. He looked at me for a long time. This was the moment. I understood it clearly even then, where he was making a decision. He was reading me, deciding whether I was lying, deciding what category I belonged in, and what the appropriate response to that category was. The man in the corner kept doing whatever he was doing on his phone. The young one by the door shifted his weight slightly, the first movement he'd made since we came in. The cooking smells from deeper in the building. Garlic and onion. Someone's lunch. The man in the handmade chair nodded. Once, very slightly. To himself. He ejected the SD card, placed it on the table between us. Then he reached to the side. I hadn't seen it there, it had been there the whole time. And picked up a small hammer. The kind of hammer you use for specific small tasks. He hit the SD card once, clean, flat. The card cracked down the middle with a sound that was much smaller than I expected. He placed both halves back on the table facing me. Then he looked at the camera. I understood. I pushed the camera across the table toward him. He hit it 4 times. Not with rage, methodically. The screen, the lens, the body, the card slot. 4 strikes, each placed precisely, the way you disassemble something that needed to be disassembled and had no further use. He placed it on the table. He folded his hands. He said, "You are filming a neighbourhood that doesn't want to be filmed." He said it the way a reasonable man explains a reasonable policy. No malice, no performance. No interest in whether I understood the reasons behind the policy or agreed with them. Just the rules stated plainly. The thing I had not known because I had not asked. The thing that everyone on that street had known from the moment I stepped off the bus and raised my camera. You are filming a neighbourhood that doesn't want to be filmed. Now you know. He nodded at the young one by the door. The young one walked me back. 2 streets. Not roughly. Just beside me, the pace set. The direction clear. The unpaved road. The heat. We passed a woman hanging washing who didn't look at either of us. A man fixing something on a bicycle who looked up, registered us, looked back down. A child, not the same one I'd filmed earlier, a different one, who watched us pass with the frank observation of a child who hasn't learned yet to look away. At the corner where the street meets the wider road back toward the terminal, the young one stopped, said nothing. He didn't say anything because nothing needed saying. The direction back to the terminal was obvious. I was going in it. He was done. I said, and I don't entirely know why I said this, it came out before I'd decided to say it. I said, "What's his name?" The young one looked at me. A pause. Then he said, "Don Papo." Then he turned and walked back into the neighbourhood. I walked to the terminal. I didn't run. Running is a statement, and the statement it makes in that situation is the wrong one. I understood this without being able to fully explain how I understood it. I just walked. The unpaved road, then the paved road, then the wider avenida, then the terminal. The heat on my back. The ordinary sounds of a Tuesday afternoon in Soledad. I took the bus back to Barranquilla. Back at the hotel, I sat on the bed for a while without doing anything in particular. The room was air-conditioned, which felt like a different planet from where I'd just been. I thought about the camera. It was a good camera. 3 years old. We'd been a lot of places together. I was fonder of it than is probably reasonable for an inanimate object. I thought about the SD card cracked clean on a plastic table. I thought about the 4 seconds of a dark car on a street that had meant nothing to me, and apparently meant enough to warrant all of this. I thought about the man in the handmade chair, Don Papo, who he was in that neighbourhood. Not the title, not the role, but the actual weight of it. The chair itself told you something. Someone had made that chair and given it to him. At some point in some transaction, I would never know the details of, someone had built a chair and said, "This is yours." And in a room where everything else was plastic and functional and replaceable, the chair sat there as the only permanent thing, and he sat in it, as the only person that had ever sat in it. And the combination of the man and the chair was, I want to find the right word, complete. That's the word, complete. Like something that had found its correct form. He had explained the rule once, demonstrated it, sent me on my way. I want to be honest about the full range of what I felt that afternoon sitting on a hotel bed in the air conditioning. Frightened, yes. Shaken, yes. The specific aftershock of adrenaline that arrives after the situation is over and the body starts processing what it was doing for the past however many minutes. But also, and this is the part that is harder to explain, a strange kind of clarification. 6 years of studying how informal communities govern themselves, how they establish their own rules and enforce them, how they protect what they've built from the intrusions of the outside world. I'd read about it, written about it, taught it in a seminar room in Copenhagen to students taking notes on laptops. I'd just been on the receiving end of it. The governance of Don Papo's neighbourhood worked exactly as the literature described. The lookouts, the man against the wall, the boy on the bicycle, the rapid communication, the non-violent but completely effective intervention, the clear statement of the rule, the demonstration of consequences, the return to normality, the young one walking me to the edge and turning back, the neighbourhood resuming its Tuesday afternoon as if nothing had interrupted it. Because for the neighbourhood, nothing had interrupted it. This was just the system working. I had walked into a room that my entire professional life had been spent studying from the outside. The irony is not lost on me. I've sat with it for a while now. It's still sharp. I got a new camera when I got back to Copenhagen. Good one. Better than the last. I have not been back to Soledad. Not because I'm afraid, just because I know what it would mean to go back. I know now what I didn't know then. What it means to walk into a neighbourhood with a camera without asking first. What the asking means and who you ask, and why the asking matters regardless of your intentions. Good intentions. Don Papo could see I had them. He said nothing about them. He split the SD card anyway. That's the thing about rules, they're not about your intentions. They're about the rule. My name is Mikkel. I'm an urban planner from Copenhagen. I flew to Barranquilla to document an invisible city, and I found it, and it found me back. And a man called Don Papo, in a handmade chair, explained in one sentence what 6 years of study had not quite managed to make real. You were filming a neighbourhood that doesn't want to be filmed. Now you know. This is my expat stories. The camera was replaceable. The rule was not.